I get a call one day from Randy. He says, "Hey, Mike, I want to see you in my office." I said, "Okay." He says, "We've selected you for a special mission. I can't tell you what it is. Show up at base ops in the morning with your flight suit, and somebody will pick you up in an F4." So I said, "Okay." So show up at 7 o'clock in the morning, and here's an F4 from Edwards. It's got Edwards tail numbers on it. Some colonel gets out. His name's Norm Suits. Okay. And he says, "Captain Press?" I said, "Yes, sir." He says, "Hop in the back." So I take off right at sunup, and take off north out of Nellis. Says we get about six or 700 feet. He drops right down to 50 feet over the desert, as fast as he can go. 400 knots. And I'm looking around. Cactus are coming by me, and get about 50 miles north, and then he makes a hard left turn. Okay, and there's a ridge line there. He pops up over the ridge, and there's Groom Lake right in front of me, and Area 51. I didn't even know it was Area 50. I knew it as all I knew was the box. They called it the box. Don't ever go in the box. But there it was. I mean, and I'd never seen it before. And he drops down to, again, 50 feet over the lake. And then you see the hangars and the runway. And he comes over the hangar, almost supersonic. And again, 50 feet over the ground, over the hangars. Pops up, lands, taxis in. Says, "When you get out, go straight to the hangar. Don't look around, just straight to the hangar." I said, "Yes, sir." And get in the hangar, and there's a MiG-17 and a MiG-21.
Pat, welcome to 10% True. Thanks for joining us on the channel.
Okay, thank you, Steve.
Pat, before I get started and introduce you, or actually you'll introduce you, but before I introduce you introducing yourself, just a couple of quick admin notices to the audience. If you are watching this on YouTube, please like and subscribe to the channel and share it if you think that Bat's stories are worth listening to, which I'm absolutely certain you will. And just be aware also that this podcast goes out on Spotify, so not the video part, but just the audio part, and various other platforms too. But Spotify in particular is an attractive platform, so if you're a listener rather than a viewer, then on Spotify, please subscribe to the channel. Also drop a comment and like as well. And if you're looking at my shirt and admiring it, then don't forget you can go to 10percenttrue.com and you can pick up one of these 10% True Friday polo shirts, and they're on sale now. Pat, so just before we get into it, we did talk before we hit record about the fact we would dedicate this episode to Evil Peck, Gail Peck, who was a founding member of the Red Eagles, the 4477th Test and Evaluation Squadron, and who passed recently. And I know he was a friend of yours and a working buddy of yours too. So this episode goes out to him.
Yeah, rest in peace.
So we have a lot to cover, and for the audience's benefit, this is a little delayed because my daughter was ill. We may end up splitting this into two parts, but we're just going to see where the conversation goes in the usual 10% True way. Mike, Bat's his call sign, so Bat has a tremendous amount of experience across an array of very, very interesting areas of fast jet tactical aviation, including 450 combat missions in Vietnam, and one of the founding members of the Aggressors, which we'll get into, and the first tactical air command pilot to exploit MiGs as part of Project Have Idea, and hopefully Mike will be able to get into that with us a little bit later too. And also ran the part of the deception program for Desert Storm, which we'll leave it at that, and we'll come back to it. So So I've just got to ask you then, Mike. How did you get into aviation? What's your story? How did you end up flying fighters?
Well, it's quite a story, and I've been in aviation for over 60 years. I'm 80 years old right now. I started in aviation in college when I went to ROTC, Air Force ROTC in 1963, and that's how I got into aviation. But I don't know if you've ever seen the movie Forrest Gump. Okay, and how he was just a normal guy, and then he got into all these various significant programs and throughout his life, and he just in the right place at the right time, and that's kind of the way I feel. I'm in the right place at the right time to get into what all the MiGs, get into the MiGs, get into Desert Storm. I was I was one of the last persons out of Tehran, during that revolution, which is quite a story. I was on Ian through the streets of Tehran during the revolution.
Really?
Oh yeah, so
Okay.
that's a good war story. So I've been involved in a lot of stuff that just like Forrest Gump, he just kind of been in the right place at the right time.
Okay. Let, let,
So
let's start right at the beginning of being in the right place at the right time. And so you said you went to ROTC. Did you grow up looking at fighter aircraft and thinking I want to fly those? Did you always have a passion for doing that? Was that an objective?
actually, I didn't even think about being a pilot. This was in 1960, 61. I started college, University of Oregon, and I was thinking about being a doctor or something. I really didn't have any plans. My father, bless his heart, he was born during the Depression. Grew up in the during the Depression, and he was his my grandfather immigrated from Prussia during World War One or before World War One. But then he died early, and my father grew up as an orphan in an orphanage, and then he got married right before World War II started. And so I was born in 1943. I'm even not even a baby boomer. I was born before the baby boom. It was 1943. I was born, and that's about the time my father got drafted. He went over to served in World War II and in Germany, and so I'm not from a military family. I'm not from a aviation family. I never even thought about flying airplanes until I went to college, and the only reason I joined Air Force ROTC is because they would pay my tuition, and my father wasn't well off, so I worked my way through college, and they paid my tuition, and all I have to do is serve in the once I graduated, served 4 years in the Air Force, and so I joined the Air Force because I don't know, instead of joining the Army ROTC or something, and Vietnam was just getting started, and so I had to get a draft number, and then around 1964, 63, 2 years before I graduated, they started drafting people to go to Vietnam, and so as long as I was in ROTC, I'd get draft deferred. So I said, okay, well, then they gave me my first flight. They checked you out as a private pilot, while you're going to ROTC. And that was pretty exciting. I never, that kind of gave me the bug that, yeah, I want to be a pilot. And, but, I never thought about flying fighters or anything else. So anyway, I went off to pilot training in 1965. And my instructor was a fighter pilot. And I did real well. Actually, I graduated #1 in my class of 1,000 pilots in that class.
Wow.
And I was #1. And of course, now Vietnam, they started bombing up north in Vietnam in 1965. So most of the people graduating were going straight to Vietnam, and anybody that got a fighter. So I put in for a fighter, but my instructor was a F-100 pilot, single seat fighter. So he says, "Okay, you got your choice of any airplane you want. Take an F-100 or an F-105, and if you're going to go to Vietnam, you go as a single seat fighter pilot." Well, so I got a 105 slot, and and obviously go right over to Vietnam in 1965. And I was all ready to go. I was packed and graduated, and I had a slot. And then they said, "Well, all the F-105s are getting shot down, so all the airplanes that we were training people in had to go over there to the war, and so you don't have a 105. So what else you want?" I said, "Well, okay, how about an F-100? No, we don't have a 100. So the only fighter they had was the F-4, and the only slot was an F-4 to Europe. So I said, "Okay, well, I'll take that." So I went over. My first assignment was at Ramstein in Germany, flying nukes. So we were on alert. We had I think it was called a B-61 or something. It was a tactical nuclear on the center line, and we'd sit alert. And my first assignment was flying nuclear low level attack. So we'd take off. My first assignment was first target that I was going to hit was in eastern Czechoslovakia from Ramstein. We had enough gas. We had to go low level, right on the treetops, and so it's called the Eibenstrasse assignment. Okay, one way street. So it was the Eibenstrasse target that I had. So we had enough gas to get to the target, do a loft maneuver. So we'd loft the nuke up in the air as we're climbing, do an escape maneuver, and then punch out. That's about all the gas we had. And they gave us a map. They gave us a map that here's your E&E route, your escape and evasion route. Back, you had to walk back to either, back to Switzerland is what you're trying to get to, because it's a neutral country. And after the fact, unfortunately, we realized, and when we saw the war plan, these nukes are going to go off all over the place. So there's nowhere, you're gonna die of radiation before you get to Switzerland if you don't get killed otherwise.
Wow.
But so that was my first assignment, and but in between time of doing these practice missions, for that and dropping these nukes. We'd go up on the range up in there was a range up in either in the Netherlands or somewhere that we'd practice these and at nighttime and everything was done, low altitude and but then every once in a while you'd have a day mission and just to go out and do some I don't know. We didn't do anything. We didn't do any air to air. It was all air to ground. And but we'd get jumped by British Lightnings and French Mirages, and while we're flying around, and so we'd practice a little dogfighting while we're doing that, and that was fun. But like I said, most of my training. All the training that I had in the F4 was air to ground, mostly air to ground. No air to training. So anyway, I was there for about 2 years, and then they said, okay, I was coming up for reassignment, and I said, well, I want to go to Vietnam. I want F4 to Vietnam, and they said, well. We don't have any F4s to Vietnam. All we have is best we can do is a OV-10. If you want to go to Vietnam, you can go right now. We got an OV-10 slot. This was in 1969. Okay. Well, it was 68 when I put in for the assignment. So in 1969, I said, okay, well, and about that time, the war was really going strong. But then in 68, they had a bombing halt up north, so everything was in country. But they were winding down. Nixon came in, and him and Kissinger said, "Well, we're gonna wind down Vietnam." That's what he ran on, and so the war was winding down. I wanted to make sure I got over there before it wound down, because I thought, if you're going to make a career out of the Air Force, you better go to Vietnam. Okay. And so I volunteered, and I said, okay, well, I'll take an OV-10. And so then so I got checked out. And the OV-10, I don't know if you know it, it's a neat airplane to fly. It's fully acrobatic. It's twin engine Garrett engines, counter rotation turboprops, and really super powerful. And short takeoff, landing, and single pilot. It did have a back seat for the observer, but we flew it without an observer. And so it was a fun airplane to fly. And so then I got over to Vietnam in 1968. I'm sorry, 1969. Okay, so, and it was a 1-year tour. So couple of war stories going over. First, they send you to before you go to Vietnam, they sent you to survival school up at Spokane, Washington, and put you in a prisoner of war camp and teach you how to, see how long you could prevent you from, saying, okay, I give up. Put you in a little coffin, and for overnight, so you can't move. And yeah, it was pretty bad. He taught you don't want to ever get into a POW camp. And then they send you, they send you to Clark Air Force Base in the Philippines, and they take you out in a helicopter out into the jungle, and they give you 5 chits to these little gold, like, I don't know, $2 chits, and they call them tokens. And they said, okay, we'll drop you off like you got shot down, drop you off in the jungle, and then they said, and then we got these Filipino natives, negritos they call them, and they said, we'll drop you off. Here's your map. You gotta go from where you're getting dropped off to your pickup area, which is about a two day walk, and so if you can get to the pickup area and you still have any chits left, then you're probably 1 in 100 that ever made it. Okay, so you're in the jungle for 2 or 3 days trying to stay away from the natives, because if they catch you, then you got to give them a chip. That's how they get paid. I lost mine the first night, I think. Anyway, so then you get to Vietnam. I got to Vietnam. They assigned me to the 504th Tactical Air Support Group in Benoit, just north of Saigon, and gave me a short checkout in the airplane, and they said, okay, you got to go up. You got to go up to it was called the Parrot's Beak, which was it was about, I don't know, 100 miles north of Saigon, up Highway 1, and right on the Cambodian border. And it's where the Ho Chi Minh Trail ended. Okay, the Ho Chi Minh Trail started up in the north, and that's where the Viet Cong got all their supplies, and they came down south through Laos, Cambodia, and then came in Parrot's Beak into South Vietnam. So I was assigned to the Second Brigade, First Air Cav. So me and my radio operator and crew chief flew up to it was a fire base called Song Bay, which was the brigade, First Air Cav Brigade headquarters. Okay, and so it was a Army Brigade headquarters, and it was a fire base, and it was about 1,000-foot strip cut out of the jungle, airstrip, with this matting, steel matting that they put down so that the C-130 can come in and land. And of course, the OV-10, I could land in 500 feet, because you get down to stall, you get down almost to stall, and I don't know, 50 knots or so, and then put it in reverse thrust and touch down right at the end, and you're in reverse thrust.
Wow.
So 500 feet, you can take off and land in 500 feet. So
Mike, what's the mission? Are you interdiction? Are you Army support? Are you a FAC? What is it you're doing?
It's the mission is a forward air controller. It's called forward air controller. So you got armament on the OV-10. We had rocket pods and for smoke rockets, and we had some rockets that had actually grenades or flechettes and stuff like that. You did have armament on there, but it's really putting in It's spotting for airstrikes.
Okay. So you are.
So you put airstrike.
Okay. And at this point, then, how many, when you arrive in Vietnam and you deploy to this army base, how many hours do you have in the OV-10? How experienced are you in the airplane?
Oh, I don't know, less than 50.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe 50 hours at the most.
Okay. Did you feel, so I want to get into the missions and I want to get into your indoctrination into that world and how things worked out for you, but I just want to understand a little bit about how you felt at that time. So you've gone from flying fast jets in Germany, low level nuke strike. Now you're flying this prop job, which you described as being fully maneuverable and aerobatic and great to fly. But are you looking at the decision you made to put the papers in to go and fly that in Vietnam at this point then and thinking that was a wise decision? Is there any part of you that thinks, actually, I would prefer to be in a jet in this environment?
No, again, because I started out, I wasn't, I don't even know if I was at that point. I wasn't trying to make, I wasn't looking at this as a career move. Okay, I mean, and I always thought if once I did my tour, I'd go back flying the F4 again. I mean, that was my mental thought. I was gonna go do this, and it wasn't something I was gonna do forever. And I was just I'll get back in the F4 and fly the F4 until my term, my duty's up.
Hmm.
Again, I wasn't looking at it as a career move at all.
Yeah.
So it was just I knew I had to go to Vietnam sometime, and my next assignment was going to be Vietnam, and so I said, okay, well, I might as well go sooner than later. But I wanted to go and and at that time, I mean, the bombing, there was no bombing hold. So if you were gonna fly even fast jets, you're gonna be flying in Vietnam. I mean, in South Vietnam, you weren't gonna be flying up north.
Mm.
So you weren't gonna be dogfighting MiGs or doing that stuff. So no, I really enjoyed it. I thought it was a fun airplane to fly. It was a mission that had to be done. I thought I was pretty good at it because a lot of, I don't say most, I said, maybe more than half of the Ford air controllers, because they had the O1 Bird Dog, and they had the O2 Skymaster, and then they had the OV-10. So, I didn't want to fly either one of those, obviously. The OV-10 was the best the best assignment if you're going to fly a Ford air controller. Mm-hmm. And I tell you, Steve, it really opened my eyes to what the Army does. Okay, and because you're flying fast jets, you don't know what's going on the ground. I mean, and you don't know what the Army does, or you're dropping bombs and you go back to your base at Da Nang or one of these Air Force bases, and you're sleeping in a nice barracks and overnight, and taking a shower every day, and you go fly and you come back and you go to the bar, and you got all the amenities of it's not really like a war, where living with the Army. So I went up, me and my radio operator and crew chief, we go up to the brigade headquarters, the Army fire base, and that's all it was, a fire base. And everybody lived in tents or foxholes or, so there's no buildings. It was all tents and foxholes. And that's where they operated out of. The Army did. So I'd go up there for a month, 2 months at a time, just
Really?
just me and my crew chief, and that was the only uh, airplane on the base. Everything else was helicopters and Hueys and all that. So it's the first air cav, so it's all Hueys and um, Cobras, you know, helicopters. So I was the only Air Force. Me and my operator were the only Air Force guys on the base.
Mike, tell us about then learning how to call in strikes. Then, so I suppose one of the things that you think about, I mean, as most people's only experience of this would be watching films, and of course that's not really a facsimile for the real thing. But the canopy, the dense canopy, the inability perhaps to see where your guys are on the ground in comparison to the enemy. How do you learn the art then of being a FAC in that environment?
Yeah. So for one thing, it's a triple canopy jungle. Okay, so you can't see anybody on the ground. Okay, so you can't see the enemy and you can't see the friendlies on the ground. The only way you know where they are is you're in radio contact with the friendlies. Okay, and if they want to call in an airstrike, okay, they have to pop a smoke grenade or something. Comes up the trees, and so you see a yellow smoke or blue smoke or whatever, and that's where the friendlies are. Okay, and then they say, okay, well, where's the enemy? If you want to put in an airstrike, where's the enemy? So they got to tell you, well, it's 10, 15 clicks to the south, or give you a direction, and so then if you got an airstrike, they said, okay, put an airstrike there, and you'd say, okay, so you'd have to roll in and put a smoke rocket where you want the airstrike to be, and that'll come up white smoke usually. And so you tell the fighters that are sitting up there at 10,000 feet, okay, well, you got the white smoke. Said, yeah, okay, well, put in the airstrike, but don't put it any further north than that smoke. Put it from that smoke south. That's where the airstrike goes in. So so you don't really see. The only time I saw guys on the ground is I'd go do they called BDA. Body damage assessment, bomb damage assessment. I'd go do BDAs after a B-52 airstrike. They call them arc lights, where they put down, I don't know, 500 bombs, string them out in the triple jungle and knock down every tree in the triple jungle. And all they got is bomb craters. And you'd fly in right after the airstrike, and you'd see guys running, not running around, just kind of staggering around. And then if it's a free fire zone, I had a couple of machine guns on the airplane too. You can go down and shoot them.
Was it? And sorry if it's a silly question, but was it a sort of harrowing mission then? I mean, I in my mind's eye, I'm thinking, you've got young Americans on the ground. You're in, let's say, sort of danger close type situations. You've got fighters who have the ability to lay down, depending on what type it is, maybe sort of 8, 12 bombs each, and there's 4 of them that kind of come in, and it's all high stakes. Was it like that?
Yeah, it was bombs or napalm or and it was a different war. It was a different kind of war. I mean, so you're living with these guys on the ground. You're after the day's missions. Most of them were days because didn't have a lot of night vision stuff. So you'd land, and I usually flew 3 missions a day. One in the morning, at sunrise, and one in the midday, and then one in the evening before sunset. And then you'd land. You'd go to the tent, the mess tent, and get your MREs or whatever you're going to eat, and have a couple beers, and sit down with the guys that were calling in the airstrikes. That they were out there fighting, and then after everybody got drunk, you'd go to sleep and wake up the next day and do it again. And that's one of the reasons I stopped drinking. About midway through the tour, I was coming back off the morning flight. Okay, and I landed and taxied in, and I had about 50 holes in the airplane from guys on the ground shooting at me.
Really?
So anyway, I went back to the tent and went to sleep, took a nap, and getting ready for the afternoon mission. Or the noon mission. So I come back out to the airplane. Gucci says, "Hey, Captain Press." He said, "Captain Press, you must have had a pretty bad mission this morning." I said, "What do you mean?" I said, "Well," he says, "you got 50 bullet holes. I patched them up. It's okay. But you kind of parked kind of strange." And he says, "That was a pretty hairy mission." I says, and I said to him, I don't even remember flying the mission.
Really?
And, because I drank too much the night before. And of course, all the draftees, of course, most of them are smoking grass or they're on drugs, these young kids that, 18-year-old kids that got drafted. So anyway, I don't know, if you really, I don't know if you drink or not, but if you drink too much, you can't remember where you parked the car.
Yeah.
I can remember where I parked the airplane. So, okay, that's it. And I haven't drank since. That was,
really? Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. That's probably why you got to 80 and you don't look like you're 80.
Yeah, that's I made it to 80. Anyway, no, it was, it was, I mean, obviously you could, if you tried to stay up above 15,000 and 1,500 feet, because small arm fire, and or 2,000 feet above the ground, and because that's where small arm fire can get you. Every once in a while, you get into they got some heavy anti-aircraft guns, stuff like that. Yeah, so it could get pretty dangerous.
Did you see them, Mike? Could you see muzzle flashes? Could you? Well, how did you? Can you hear it? Feel it?
Yeah, if they had the AAA, you could see it, muzzle flashes, because they couldn't shoot up through the triple canopies, so they're probably sitting up on the edge of a field or something and shooting at you.
Okay.
They really didn't want to shoot at the facts because they knew the facts are calling an airstrike.
Yeah.
So if they shot at you, if they knew you saw them, they'll shoot at you. Yeah. But they're trying to avoid the facts because they don't want the airstrikes coming in on them. And so, like I said, I flew 3 times a day for a whole year, and that's how I got 450 missions.
Did you? So I wanted to go back to the smoke. So I've read, I'm sure, about the North Vietnamese, maybe the Viet Cong. I don't know which force it was. Would maybe both would use smoke as a deception. So they would kind of listen into the radio and say, and if the grunt said I popped, grape smoke, purple smoke, whatever, then they would do the same. And you experience that, and how do you mitigate that?
Well, I don't know. When I was over there, I mean, I don't think you know, none of those guys, the South Vietnamese went. Most of them, I mean, the Viet Cong that we were going after, I never experienced that they were spoofing you. Uh, they tried to hide. They tried to hide from you if they could, because they knew if you're gonna, a fact found them, they were gonna call in an airstrike on them. So
can you tell us a bit about that process then? And so you've got, I mean, I'm leading a bit, but you'll provide the real answer. But you slack some fighters, you call them in one by one or flight by flight or whatever, and then you can adjust their aim as necessary. But were there fighters that you preferred to work with? Were there squadrons that you preferred to work with? If you heard a certain call sign on the radio, did you know you were going to get a good service from them, so to speak? What was
it mostly the we were dealing also with the South Vietnamese Air Force, and they had the
A-37s?
slower movings. What do they call them?
The dragonflies, the A-37Bs, didn't they?
Yeah, they had the A-37, but they also had the
T-28s.
Huge, yeah. And they were good because they were slower and they get lower, get in and be pretty accurate with their weapons. The F-4 wasn't a good close air support airplane because they were going so fast. They're dive bombing and they weren't very accurate. Now, if you get the napalm where they coming in low and dropping napalm, then that's pretty good. That's right on target because they're dropping at 1,000 feet instead of 10,000 feet. But they're dropping bombs at 10,000 feet. They're not very accurate, and so you want to get the slower movers that get down low and maybe do skip bombing. If you skip bombing, you're dropping low. You're coming in low and you're pretty accurate.
Does that? So forgive the ignorance. When you say skip bombing, does the bomb actually skip, or is that just a name for it?
It's where you're just coming in real low, but you're 400 coming at 400 knots and at 1,000 feet, and just dropping the bomb.
Okay.
And I guess they call it skip bombing because sometimes they will skip.
Okay.
Yeah.
What about then? You just talked about the North Vietnamese obviously not wanting to be discovered, again based just on my reading and what I understand. They're a paramilitary force, so they can look a bit like civilians, or they blend in with the civilian population. Was that your experience as well? Did you ever catch any out in the open? Was it easy to tell between a North Vietnamese and a farmer and a paddy? What was your experience?
No, you couldn't tell. You couldn't tell a good Viet Cong with the South Vietnamese enemy and North Vietnamese regular. You can tell the difference between that and some friendly, okay, Vietnamese. So we had free fire zones where they know there weren't any, friendlies there, and there weren't any U.S. forces there. So if you did see somebody out there, you were free to engage them. And sometimes I'd find them, they were, out walking their elephant or their water buffalo or whatever. And, but, you couldn't tell whether they were friendly or enemy at that point. It's just a free fire zone. And if you thought they were the enemy, you're cleared to fire. I mean, the rules of engagement were pretty strict there. Now, I don't know if you ever saw the movie Apocalypse Now. Okay, with Martin Sheen, Marlon Brando. Okay, well that was May 1st of 1970. Okay, May 1st, 1970 is when Nixon approved the invasion of Cambodia. Okay, and that was right. And again, I was up at the Parrot Peak at the Ho Chi Minh Trail, and the objective of that invasion was to go in and shut down the Ho Chi Minh Trail in Cambodia, okay, which is where we were. So I was FACing for the 2nd Brigade, 1st Air Cav, and then they brought in some other Army units to invade Cambodia right there at the Parrot Peak, where I was. So I was on that mission, and Apocalypse Now, when they went in, they were going to take Martin Sheen up the Mekong River and in Cambodia and go find Marlon Brando. And so they came up to Cambodia, and they came up to this village, and who was the Army 1st Air Cav Captain Robert Duvall. Robert Duvall was with the baseball cap. I mean the cowboy hat.
Yeah.
Cav hat, and he told the FAC. He says, they came up on the village, and he told the FAC. He says, drop some napalm on that village, and of course there were civilians there, and North Vietnamese and whatever, and I was FACing for the 1st Air Cav. And we came up on a village, and they had the 1st Air Cav had I don't know, they had a whole bunch of tanks and everything sitting on the hill in front of this. It wasn't a village; it was actually a city almost. It was. One huts. I mean, these were structures and buildings, and maybe 20, 30 buildings and a city center and all that. And so they came up upon this thing, and they said, they called me up, said, Bat, you see that village up there? I said, yes, sir. He says, well, we're taking fire out of that village, and we don't have time to stop and fight when our objective's another 50 clicks up the road today. So he says, put some airstrikes in on that village. I said, well, what building you want me to take out? He said, take out the whole village. So just take it all out. And so I had airstrikes lined up all the way to 30,000 feet. And just one after another, took it out. Wow. Like I said, it was a different kind of war over there, and and then so after about 2 days, I landed up there in Cambodia, and the brigade commander said, "Hey, Mike, I want to show you something." So he took me into some of the caves at the end of the Ho Chi Minh Trail, and they're just, wall to wall warehouses of ammunition, guns, and everything else. And he says, "Hey, Mike, you want one of these AK-47s as a souvenir?" I said, "Sure." So I took that. So I took it, and actually, when I left Vietnam, I went back through San Francisco airport. I still had my AK-47, and the commercial pilot says, "Hey, well, you can't take that on the airplane. Here, give it to me. I'll put it in the cockpit, and I'll give it to you when you land." So, I mean, it was a different time.
Did he give it back to you? Did he give it back to you?
Yeah, I had it. I had it for a long time. I don't know. I finally gave it away. Gave it to some gun collector.
Wow.
But yeah. Anyway, so it was it was a different kind of war. It was I got 2 DFCs out of it. One DFC is we were at the fire base we're getting overrun at night. And like I said, I was the only airplane on the field. So the brigade commander says, "Hey, can you take off and get us some airstrikes in here because we're getting overrun?" So I did. I took off, and fires going all. It was at night, so everything was dark. All the lights were shut down. So I took off and got airborne, got some airstrikes in. And,
wow.
Save the fire base from getting overrun. So I got a DFC for that. And
just before you move on to the next one, let me ask you about that one. So what do you have to do then if it's dark, you can't see anything, you're flying at night? Is it sort of natural illumination from the moon? How do you see? What did you do?
Well, sometimes we get the Jeep. What we'd probably have is I told the radio operator, I said, "Get in the Jeep, go down to the end of the runway, and when I tell you, turn your headlights on," and I'd take off.
Wow.
I aim for that. And then
wow.
Same thing at night. If you're trying to land at night and you don't want, you can't have any lights on, especially at night, because the Viet Cong will just lob in some mortars. And so and the same thing at night. We'd have the radio operator get in his Jeep, land at or put it at the end of the runway at the landing point, and then you call him up and say, "Okay, I'm on final. Put your lights on." And he'd land. As soon as you touch down, he'd shut them off.
Really? Did you have the landing lights on the airplane then?
Yeah, but you couldn't put landing lights on. They'd shoot at you.
Wow.
Yeah.
So tell us then about the second DFC then.
Second DFC is when a unit was getting overrun, and I had to put in airstrikes almost on top of them because they were getting overrun. And they'd call me and say, "Okay, they'd pop a smoke, colored smoke, and I'd say, "Okay, well, where do you want it?" So just put it on my smoke.
Really?
Yeah, because
wow.
Either that or we're going to die. So we'll all get in our, bunkers or whatever. And, so anyway, they were getting overrun. So I put in some, and obviously, and you had to be pretty accurate.
Hey everybody, sorry to interrupt your viewing, but if you'd like to support the channel, please do visit 10percenttrue.com and take a look at my store. You can buy polo shirts, t-shirts, stickers, patches, and even my books. And speaking of which, if you're listening to the podcast, this won't make sense, but if you're watching it, then great. The one that's being played in the background at the moment is my new book, F-15E Strike Eagle, Be Afraid of the Dark, Part 1. It's a glorious coffee table book, been professionally laid out and put together, tells the story of the Strike Eagle from 1984 to 2002. I'm taking pre-orders for it now. If you're interested in it, if you're thinking that might make a nice present for somebody, please do go ahead, visit 10percentdrew.com. Place an order. Thank you.
You at any point during this tour, then when you're doing this kind of stuff, do you have? It's interesting you say you stopped drinking, but so do you have time at the end of the day to think about and to process the stuff you're doing and the stuff you're going to have to do tomorrow and the next day? How do you psychologically deal with the pressure, the responsibility, the stress of that day after day? Because 450 missions in a year is crazy to me. That sounds to me like a very, very high workload. So
I'll tell you, Steve, you get out there, and again, you're living with the Army. You're living with the guys that, they're really the ones that, they're going out on patrol every day, and getting in firefights, and guys around them are getting killed, and and maimed. They had it a lot worse than I had it, and I kind of felt lucky rather than. And I said, well, I gotta get up. I gotta be, I gotta stop drinking. I gotta know what I'm doing. I gotta, protect these guys when they call me up and they're in a firefight. I gotta be there. So no, you don't think about it. And actually, you get to a point where you don't want to go back to civilization. I don't know if you've seen the movies. A couple of more movies from Afghanistan, and they get back into civilization. They just can't handle it. And same there. They'd call me, the headquarters would call me up, says, hey, well, you're due back here for, I don't know, some training or something, and, back to the Air Force headquarters. And so, just take a good time when you need to come back for a week. And I'd stay out in the field. I'd rather be out in the field and go back to headquarters and take a shower and a haircut. Yeah. No, you get out there and you just don't want to go back. And I can see these guys coming back from Iraq and Afghanistan, how it's so hard to adjust back to civilization. It's very difficult. Very difficult.
Well, one of the things that they talk about now, because it's a known, post-traumatic stress disorder is a known. Right. I don't know if it's an illness. I don't know what the medical definition for it is, but it's a thing. It's real. It's not people making stuff up or having episodes or whatever. It's a proper thing. It's So one of the things they talk about now is the importance of sharing that. Don't sit alone with those thoughts in your head. And so those thoughts are just one of the symptoms of PTSD. But did you have that too? Did you ever?
Because back then, like I said, it was hard coming back and adjusting to civilian life, and back then it was even worse because of all the anti-war riots and stuff like that, and in fact, you almost couldn't tell anybody you came back from Vietnam because Vietnam was such a stain on everything. So it was difficult.
But I suppose as well. So if you draw sort of parallels with other individuals who were like you, who were fast jet pilots and ended up probably most of them did end up going to the 105 or the F4 or the F100 or A37 or F5 or whatever it would be. They would have been in a squadron environment, and there would have been opportunities for them to sort of decompress by talking to other pilots or other fighter air crew, right? So, but you wouldn't have had that opportunity as that one guy on the base flying the OV-10.
No, I mean, I had more affinity to the Army guys that I was on the ground with. I really, and the Air Force guys, I didn't, I didn't have any Air Force. And now when I went back, when I go back for maybe a week or two back to the main operating base, Air Force operating base, where all the other facts were there, and but I'd only spent a week there, and so I really didn't get to know anybody.
Can I ask you? And this is definitely a sensitive question, but I feel like I have to ask. But you described how it was impossible to tell the difference between a civilian and a Viet Cong, and or a North Vietnamese regular and a South Vietnamese, and so on and so forth. And you talked about leveling the village and so on, and having the free fire zones. Did you, from an emotional or even just a psychological point of view, have to push aside any thoughts you might have that you were hitting civilians? If you level a village, hopefully everyone's been cleared out, but maybe not.
Not when you're doing it. Now, certainly, over the years, you wish you didn't maybe pull the trigger when you should have just let that person go, because you didn't really know whether they were enemy or friendly. I mean, that does bother me over the years. Yes. Yeah. But
have you been back to Vietnam? Have you some guys go back as I don't know if this is a sort of cathartic or a meditative type thing or a healing process, but they go back to there and.
Yeah, no, I don't have any desire to go back there. But I do have a lot of Vietnamese friends that were that got out of the war, and the boat people and stuff like that. I do have friends that I stay in touch with.
Do you have to be? Do you just have to be philosophical about that? I mean, if you talk about, I suppose that people go through life. Part of the process of going through life is having regrets about things you did earlier in your life, and I suppose if you then get put into a situation where you're in a war, then that's going to be amplified a million times. But do you have to deal with those thoughts? Just be philosophical about it and just say it's war, and those things happen. Can you get away with ascribing what happened to that?
Yeah, you have to do that, but it's hard. It's not. I mean, it's not easy, and I'm sure. Now, being a pilot and being off the ground and not doing it, you're not face to face with that. It's a little easier to say, well, I shouldn't have dropped the bomb on that person, because I didn't know whether he was really enemy or not. But after the fact, it's something that you do have regrets, obviously. Yeah.
Slightly different question then. Well, a very different question, but just staying with this kind of thing for the moment. So the OV-10 is well known for having a little sort of bay in the back, isn't it, with the clamshell doors?
Yeah.
So if I'm remembering correctly, the existence of American forces in Laos and Cambodia was classified at the time. So there was some counter operations, insurgency stuff that happened. Did you ever get involved in any of that, putting people in the back of your OV-10 and dropping them off in the jungle?
No. I didn't. But some of my friends did that were they went up. They went up on the trail. In fact, I had a roommate that was in when I went back to the main base. He was in a different unit than I was, a different fire base, and so he was flying OV-10s, and we were both flying OV-10s, and he Dave Reese was his name, and he after about 6 months he volunteered for assignment to it was basically it was Air America that they were flying in Laos. They were flying O1s in Laos up on the trail, and he was a great guy. I mean, we when we ever sometimes when we go back to the main operating base, and he. So I said, how'd you get that assignment? I said, that sounds pretty exciting. I might want to do that. And he says, well, for one thing, they don't take anybody that's married. I said, and he wasn't married, and I was. So he said, I don't take anybody that's married because it's pretty dangerous. Anyway, he went up there. He went to Thailand, got in an O1. And flew across up into Laos and got shot down on his first mission and killed.
Wow.
But they had a lot of those Air America guys flying up there and FACing up there.
Tell me about that too. I mean, I this interview is supposed to be a fun experience for you, so I'm sorry if I'm asking lots of questions about emotions and feelings and psychology, but I think it's important to ask, and you can be as brief or as curt with your answers as you want to be. But so flying fast jets, especially in those days, as all the audience listening will know, is a really, really dangerous thing. Lots of people die in training accidents. Lots of people die in peacetime. Going to war, then again, you just, orders of magnitude more risky. Did you, as a young captain, then, did you think about death? Did you feel fear and, and in the aeroplane, but also on the ground? I mean, you just kind of casually said that, being on the ground when the base is being mortared, that sounds absolutely terrifying to me. You talk back casually about the base being overrun by the Viet Cong. That sounds terrifying as well. What did you feel fear?
No, I didn't. The only time I felt fear is one. No, I didn't. Because you're getting attacked. Your adrenaline starts, and you go back to your basic survival mode. Where you grab your M16 and you go out on the perimeter, and and when you see somebody outside the perimeter, you shoot them.
Yeah.
So, I mean, and that's that night. That's what it was. I mean, I had my M16. I was on the perimeter, and the colonel comes over to me and says, "Hey, Mike, I don't know if we're going to make this or not. You better get in your airplane and get airborne." So, I was on the perimeter with the M16 and looking. When somebody pops their head up on the other side of the perimeter, I shoot at it. So,
wow.
But you don't have time to think about anything except survival mode.
Well, what about as you near the completion date of your tour? I mean, there's also this sorts of superstitions that I've read about. Guys being given milk runs for their last 3 or 4 missions if they're doing, if it's 100 missions north, it's 100 missions north, isn't it, for those pointy nose guys? But there's a sort of conservation element that comes in, personal preservation element that comes in at the end. Did you, as you approach the end of that year, start feeling, well, I better be a bit more cautious? Did anything creep into your ritual to make you think, I definitely want to go home? I don't want to die on my last day.
Actually, I was thinking maybe re-up and just stay on. I mean, like I said, it was, you get over there, you really you meet a lot of friends, and you want to finish the mission. But towards the end of my tour, they actually made me an instructor. So I go back to the main base, and they'd give me some new guys to check out coming into the country the first time. And that was one of the hairier missions I had. I was sitting in the back seat, the observer seat of the OV-10. It had a stick, so you could fly it from the back seat. Okay, and the newbie was in the front seat. Okay, and he came out of, I don't know, tankers or something. He flew. He didn't have any fighter experience. Didn't have any experience other than he was another guy to throw into the mix. And so he wasn't a very good pilot, for one thing, and didn't know anything about fighter airplanes and stuff like that. So anyway, we went out. I gave him his night checkout. So we went out one night, got up north of the base, and got night and put in some airstrikes, and the weather was really getting bad back at the main base, and so we had to get back. We didn't have a lot of gas left. We're dodging thunderstorms coming back, and then the airbase got some mortar rounds in there, so they had to shut all the lights off. And they thought they might be getting attacked, so they had to shut all the lights off at the field. And like I said, the clouds were moving in. We were getting low on gas, and so we had maybe time for one or two landing, missed approach, and so he was getting scared, really scared, and so he says, I don't know if I don't know if I can do this. He says, he threw up his hands. He says, you're going to have to take it. So I'm sitting there looking around, looking, see if I can see anything out front, and talk to the radio operator. I said, get on the end of the runway, and when I tell you, turn your lights on. So I had to make the landing, and he just froze up. And that's probably one of the more dangerous missions I had, before I was getting ready to leave the next week and going back home.
Really? What happened to him then? Did he get sent home?
No, I don't know. I went home, and they probably gave him another instructor and gave him some more rides or something, or tried to check. I don't know what happened to him.
Are you using for general navigation then in those sorts of situations? Are you using TACAN to help you? I mean, are you just on a bearing and a range from a radio transmitter, a BOR?
All visual.
Really? But how do you? I mean, I just imagine all the jungle canopy looks the same. I mean, you talked about parrot beaks. Obviously, there are some distinguishing features. There are always some geographical reference points you can find. But
let me try to remember. Let's see. We might have had some navigation. We must have had some type of navigation, but I can't even remember what it was.
Okay. Yeah, it was a long time ago. So
it's mostly good.
Yeah.
You fly over the same territory 400 times, you can probably do it blindfolded. Yeah. So by certain features. I mean, there's a couple of mountain peaks, and stick out, and so it was so that was my baptism of combat.
I want to ask you, Mike, a question that takes us back in the time span of this interview, not in the time span of your life, about 45 minutes, and that is, before we go any further, I want to go back right to UPT. and I want to understand what it takes to graduate top of your class when your class is 1,000 people. Why were you number one?
Well, I was number one because of my flying skills and not because of my academics. I was never a top academic student, even in college. Okay. So I was average, average in academics. And so they score you. So your flying skills are scored more than your academic scores, but they score both. So I did well enough on academics that I wasn't in the bottom of the class, but I wasn't going to be number one in academics. But so they give you check rides, and they score, in each phase of your primary. I started out in the A37, and then I went into the T38. I was in one of the first T38 classes, by the way. Yeah, yeah. So you start off in primary training, which is the A37, and you go through transition and formation and instruments and navigation, and so there's those phases, and then you take a check ride after each phase, and they give you a score. And then you do the same thing in the T38, transition, instruments, formation, navigation. And then they add the scores up, and the one with the highest score gets number one.
Did you struggle with nothing then? I mean, you presumably would have to have, I use the term cautiously, mastered what it was you were being tested on. I'm not suggesting you were a master aviator at the end of the winging process, but
I think, like I said, I wasn't even planning to be an aviator at one time, and I wasn't, and I had maybe, in ROTC, I got maybe 25, 50 hours, and 130, 172 or something, and so that's what I started with, and I had a good instructor. Like I said, he was a fighter pilot, so he was a good instructor, and it just came natural to me, is all I can say. Flying came naturally to me. I mean, and I loved it. I loved to do it. I mean, I couldn't wait till my next flight. I couldn't, I'd study. Obviously, I'd study for my flights, and of course, you'd have simulators and stuff like that, and you go through the simulators, but I would, the night before, I would sit down and visualize the whole flight, and what I was going to do the whole flight, from taxi to takeoff to the maneuvers we're going to fly, and come back and land. It's kind of like a golfer. The pro golfers, they visualize, and they get into this zone, and they call it the zone, where they can just put everything out of your mind and just visualize the swing and the ball flight. That's the way I'd prepare for my flights. I'd go over it and over and over again. So when I got in the airplane, I knew exactly what I was going to do. That's what I think. That's probably why I excelled on each check ride. I knew exactly what to do before the flight.
Did you start then, as you're going through this process, you fall in love with flying? Did you start eyeing up? I mean, you've talked through what happened in terms of, going for F105, and then there was no F100, then there was, no F4 to Vietnam. So you've talked through that process. But as you're going through UPT, you're flying from T-37 to T-38, and it's getting the airplane's getting faster, pointier, sexier, dare I say it. Are you starting to eye up a particular fast jet? Then are you now? Are you picturing yourself as a fast jet pilot, as a tactical aviator?
Not really. Actually, it was kind of strange because I ended up number one, so I had my choice. And so my instructor says, "Okay, well, what are you going to select?" I says, "Well, I don't know. I might select. My brother-in-law is a commercial pilot for United. Maybe I'll take a transport or a, you know." And he said, "Mike, you do that, and I'll come back and beat you over the head. You're going to take a fighter." Okay. I said, "I am?" He said, "Yes, you are." I said, so yeah, no, I didn't. No, I never. I didn't dream. I never visualized or never dreamed how exciting being a fighter pilot would be. Okay, and then we'll talk about how I got in the aggressors and Gale Peck and all that. But
Okay.
when I came back from Vietnam and I got back in the F4, that's when I realized that's what I want to do for the rest of my life.
Okay. Let me ask you about that then before you, because you're going to go where you want to go with this conversation. But let me get two questions in first of all. So the one is the first question is the question of you having this emotional attachment to the Army guys, a sense of duty and a sense of protection to make sure those guys have you sort of keeping effectively a watchful eye over them and supporting them. So how do you deal with losing that? And then the second part of the question is a practical one, which is how do you go from your 150, 200 knot OV-10 back to a 450 knot F4? So those are my two questions, and then we'll see where you go.
Well, you never lose the attachment to the Army guys. Okay. When I meet Vietnam vets or any vets, and if they're in the Army, I'll say, "Hey, well, I was in the first air cav when I was in Vietnam, and I actually went to Army General Staff College when I had my staff tour, and if they were." Guys said, "Well, I was in Vietnam, but I was flying, so and so, and unless they were up north, flying against MiGs, and I really I didn't feel attached to them as I felt attached to the Army guys."
So do you just have to compartmentalize? Do you just have to, in your mind, say that was then? I'm now back in the States doing something else.
Yeah, you have to. Yeah, you have to put it behind you. And actually, I didn't really start. I don't think I really talked about Vietnam, for maybe the last few years. Just it was something that I did, and it was so long ago. And I got a lot of other war stories that are more current. Mm-hmm. And you don't meet well, now, that was 70 years ago.
Yeah.
60 years ago.
Yeah.
You don't meet a lot of people that are even alive at that time or experience that. So
yeah,
you don't have a lot of, things that you can talk to people about that they, "Oh yeah, well, I remember I was here at that time, and I was there at this time," but you don't, it's so long ago.
What about the transition then back to a faster airplane?
So I got an assignment back to the F4. It was an RTU unit down at McDill, and it's a replacement training unit. So we were instructors training guys coming out of pilot training or transitioning to the F4, and this was in 1970. So the Vietnam War was still going on. Okay, and the Vietnam War didn't get over till 72, 73. So we were training guys to go to Vietnam. And so I was instructor there. And because I did not, because my only training in the F4 was with nukes over in Europe, okay, I didn't have any real air to ground training that was needed for the pilots going to Vietnam. And then the air to air training, and we can get into this later, but so the only air to air training was basically missiles, air to air missiles, Sparrow missiles, and long range intercepts and stuff like that. No, not much. There wasn't hardly any dogfighting. Okay, so they made me an air to air instructor when I came back, and because most of the guys that were the air to ground instructors were the guys that coming back from Vietnam and flew, fast jets in Vietnam. Okay, but because I didn't do that, they made me an air-to-air instructor. Thought I'd be safer that way, maybe. So, and the only air-to-air training we had was air intercepts using Sparrow missiles. Not much dogfighting, maybe a little basic fighter maneuvers, but the tactics were still Korean War tactics, and this gets back into Top Gun and why everything's changed and how I met Gail Peck. Okay, so I was there and got there back in late '70, and was instructing in '71, and then so what happened between '68 and '70? They had the bombing halt in the U.S. had the bombing halt in North Vietnam in '68. They stopped going north. They stopped having dogfights with MiGs and stuff like that. So from '65 to '68, they had all the MiG engagements in North Vietnam, both the Navy and the Air Force. Okay, but they were all flying Korean War tactics. Okay, finger four, no guts, no glory, Booth Blase, where you're flying in a finger four formation with the leader and his wingman. The wingman is sitting tucked in pretty close to the leader, just 45 degrees back, maybe 1,000 feet. Okay, hanging on for dear life and checking his six while the leader goes out and does the shooting. Okay, and so that was the tactics both in the Navy and the Air Force. Well, what they found out is when the Rolling Thunder, 65 and 68, when they engage a MiG, okay, it came out to about 50-50. MiGs would shoot one down and they'd shoot one down. And so the kill ratio for the Air Force was like 1-1. Mm-hmm. And the kill ratio for the Navy was maybe 2-1. Okay. then they had the bombing halt in '68. They had the Navy. The Navy put together a report called the Alt Report that talked about, what went wrong. Why is the kill ratio 2-to-1 or 1-to-1 when in Korea, using the same tactics, it was 14-to-1? Okay, with the F-86 and the MiGs. Okay, the MiG-15 in Korea. Okay, that was 10 years before that. So why, or 15 years before that? Why is the kill ratio so much less? And why are of course, the Navy didn't have any guns, and the Air Force, most of the time, the Air Force didn't have guns either until they got the F-4D or pod. So everything was missiles. It was the Sidewinder and the Sparrow. And the PK ratio, they found out the PK ratio, the probability to kill, firing a missile was less than 10%. Fired a missile, maybe 10% of the time you're going to get a kill. Well, why was that? And so this Halt report came out. The Navy changed their tactics to the loose deuce tactics. Okay, and so before they went back up north in '72, they were practicing loose deuce. They had the half donut, half drill, where they fought against the Israeli MiG-17 and the MiG-21, the VX-4. So, and they started Top Gun in 1968, 69. The Air Force never did that. The Air Force was still flying intercepts, finger four formation. And so when we were training at McDill, I was training in this RTU unit as a air-to-air instructor. I was still training finger four formation, the Sparrow and the Sidewinder missile attack, and that was all the training we had. We had very little basic fighter maneuvers, and mostly just air intercepts. So anyway, so after the Alt report and the Top Gun got started, Gail Peck was in the fighter flight of fighter weapons school at Nellis. Okay, and that was 1972. So they saw they go down and see what the Navy was doing, and of course they had they were involved in the half donut, half drill exercises where they knew that the MiGs, they had some of their guys flying against the MiGs and half donut, half drill. So they got with the fighter weapons school air-to-air guys with Boothby and some of those names and Moody Suter and Boothby and Gail Peck and Roger Wells and Sakahara, these guys in the fighter weapons school air-to-air convinced the generals that we're gonna start this aggressor squadron and start with the T-38s and maybe get some of these MiGs and start training our guys how to fight and change our tactics too. Got to change our tactics like the fighter weapons school or like the Top Gun guys did. So I'm down at McDill doing my thing with the air-to-air guys. I mean, training the air guys on intercepts. So Gail Peck and a couple of guys, Sakahara and Roger Wells, says, okay, well, we need to go around and we need to pick pick some guys to come out to Nellis and start this aggressor squadron. So we need, I don't know, 20 guys, 20 pilots to start this aggressor squadron. So Gail Peck and Bill Sakahara came down to McDill. Of course, nobody knew what was going on. They were just saying, well, we're going to come down and, kind of explain some of the new things. We got new tactics that we're looking at and how we, if we got to go back up north to Vietnam, in North Vietnam, here's how we might want to change some things. And so want to fly with your air-to-air instructors. Told the wing commander, we want to fly with your air-to-air instructors on a couple flights. And so I got Gail Peck was my lead. He put me on his wing. Okay. And they went through some pretty hairy maneuvers.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, pretty hairy maneuvers.
What sort of thing?
Well, they did, high-speed yo-yos, barrel rolls, and air-to-air basic fighter maneuvers. High and low-speed yo-yos, barrel rolls, 2v2 tactic. We go. Sakahara would have his wingman, and we go. They go get in a dogfight and see how long you can hang on the wing, basically.
Yeah.
So evidently I hung on. Well, I did. I didn't. He never threw me off his wing. I was there through all his maneuvers. And I don't think the guy that was flying on Sakahara's wing stayed on his wing.
So this was a test of your stick and rudder skills, effectively. Then this wasn't to come and see if you were a tactical thinker. This was about, can you fly the airplane?
Yeah, basically your stick and rudder thing. So it's kind of like a graduation exercise with pilot training. Can you stay on the wing? Can you stay in formation? Because I didn't have to see what was going on. Yeah, I couldn't see what was going on. All I could see was, okay, I'm going to stay on this guy. I'm going to stay with him wherever he goes. I don't care where he goes. I'm going to be right there. So, about later, I get a call from Gil Peck. He says, "Hey, can you move out to Nellis? We're starting up this special program. I'd like to have you out there."
Wow.
Said, "Sign me up, boss."
Did you know then about at that point, as the air-to-air instructor or as an air-to-air instructor at McDill, had you been read into drill, ferry, and donut, the big exploitations? Did you have any inkling that those airplanes had been exploited?
No, and I didn't have any inkling at all. I tell you, I didn't even know about it. So anyway, I go out to Nellis, and we start the Aggressors, and then Randy O'Neill, who was the first ops officer, and of course Randy and Gail Peck wasn't even in the Aggressors. He stayed in the fighter weapons, but a couple of guys from the fighter weapons school, Boothby and Randy O'Neill, came over, and they were the commander and the ops officer of the Aggressors. But I think those are the only guys that came over from the fighter weapons school. So they started it, but Randy O'Neill checked everybody out. And in the checkout, it was kind of the same thing that Gil Peck checked you out. Could you stay on the wing? How's your flying skills? Okay. And I was a young captain at that time. I mean, I was in the Air Force maybe 70 6 years in the Air Force. So 7 years. So I'd only been flying for and then I'd only been flying fast airplanes for 3 or 4 years. So So the checkout in the Aggressors was kind of similar, but then we said, okay, well, we're going to fly U.S. formations, and then, one flight will fly U.S. formations, the other flight will fly Russian formations. And we did that. And during the checkout, and Randy checked everybody out. And so then I get a call one day from Randy. He says, hey, Mike, I want to see you in my office. I said, okay. He says, we've selected you for a special mission. I can't tell you what it is. But show up at base ops in the morning with your flight suit, and somebody will pick you up in an F4.
Really?
Yeah. I said, he said, I can't tell you what it is. Don't tell anybody that, what you're doing. Don't tell your wife. Don't tell anybody. Just show up and special mission. And somebody will meet you at base ops at 7:00 in the morning, and be ready to go. So what do I need to take? Just take your flight suit, and flight suit and your helmet. So I said, okay. So show up at 7:00 in the morning, and here's an F4 from Edwards. It's got Edwards tail numbers on it. Okay. And some colonel gets out. His name's Norm Suits. Okay. And he says, Captain Press? I said, yes, sir. He says, hop in the back. So you take off right at sunset, sunup, and take off north out of Nellis. Says we get about 600 or 700 feet. He drops right down to 50 feet over the desert, heading as fast as he can go, 400 knots. And I'm looking around. Cactus are coming by me, and get about 50 miles north, and then he makes a hard left turn. Okay, and there's a ridge line there. He pops over the ridge, and there's Groom Lake right in front of me, and Area 51, and I didn't even know it was Area 50. I knew it as all I knew was the box. They called it the box. Don't ever go in the box. And Dreamland. They called it Dreamland, the box. But there it was. I mean, and I'd never seen it before. And he drops down to, again, 50 feet over the lake. And then you see the hangars and the runway. And he comes over the hangar, almost supersonic, and again 50 feet over the ground, over the hangars, pops up, lands, taxis in. Says when you get out, go straight to the hangar. Don't look around, just straight to the hangar. I said, yes, sir. And get in the hangar, and there's a MiG-17 and a MiG-21.
That's cool.
So that was 1972. So I was picked to be one of the first. I think there was 4 of us, but so I was picked by the MiG-17, and that was the HAB idea. And Pappy Frick was in charge of HAB idea.
Oh, was he? Okay.
And he did Red Baron too. Red Baron.
Yeah.
But he did HAB idea. And we were gonna the whole part of that program was to develop new tactics for the Air Force. Get away from the Finger 4 and use the 17 and the 21 that were there on loan from the Israelis. That's a good story too. How the U.S. got those airplanes on loan.
Can you tell it?
Yeah, let me tell you this story. So I think in '68, sometime around '68, there was a defector from Iraq and one from Syria bringing the 17 and the 21 to the Israelis. Israelis flew against them for maybe a year. And all they had at the time was A4s, and they didn't have the F4 yet. Okay, so they're flying A4s and maybe something else against them. So so they worked a deal with the U.S. and I forget who they did it with. It was who the president at the time was. 68, 70. Oh, it was Nixon and Kissinger. Okay. Nixon and Kissinger. They worked a deal, and they knew about the Israelis were in the first few classes of Top Gun. Started in '68, and they were in the first few classes of Top Gun. They lent the MiGs to the U.S. government in exchange for F4s. They weren't allowed to get the F4s. It was, for some reason. I mean, every administration does it different. So they weren't allowed to have the F4s. So they exchanged the MiGs for a squadron of F4s.
Wow.
That's how the U.S. got the MiGs. And like I said, they lent them to the U.S. for half drill, half donut, but then the U.S. wanted to keep them, and the Israeli says, "Okay, well you can keep them, but give us a squadron of F4s," which they did. So bring this story a little further along. Okay, the Yom Kippur War started in what was that, 71, 72, 71, I think. Okay, the Yom Kippur War, where the Egyptians and the Syrians and the Jordanians attacked Israel, and they were coming across the Suez Canal, and most of the Air Force airplanes got shot down or damaged or something. So they needed refills. They needed replacements, and but there's still an embargo going on shipping offensive. I don't know, just like today.
Yeah.
So one of the squadron leaders of that went to the first class at Top Gun and flew the F4 against the MiGs and at Have Done It, Have Grill, and went through the Top Gun class in the F4. He was during Yom Kippur. He'd already shot down a bunch of MiGs, but he was also in charge of the squadron. And he says, "Hey, we need more MiG, and we need more F4s. We're running out of F4s, and I know where there's a lot of them down in the States that we can use." So he said, they got 25 F4s down in Miramar. He says, why don't we see if we can't get those? So he goes up to Doshiman, was the defense guy, Secretary of Defense for the Israelis, and then Golda Meir was the prime minister. So he goes up and talks to Doshima and says, "Hey, we need that squadron F4s that are in Miramar, and we need them pretty quick, or else we're going to lose this war, you know." And so he says, the fourth temple, the code word of fourth temple is we're going to lose Israel. He says we're going to lose the fourth temple, okay, if we don't get more F4s. Told Moshe Dan. So Moshe Dan tells Golda Meir same thing. So Golda Meir tells Moshe Dan, says, "Okay, well, tell that squadron to pull out the nukes, load them up on the F4s that we got left, and do it first thing in the morning, and make sure the U2s are up looking at it." So Golda Meir gets a call from Kissinger and says, "What's going on?" She said, "We need some more F4s, and we need them from Miramar, the Top Gun school, and we need them fast, or else we're also gonna drop these nukes because we're gonna lose this war if we don't." And they you know what throw a nickel on the grass is,
Yeah.
you know, yeah. So they called up. So the Secretary of Defense called Chief Naval Operations, says, "We got Operation Nickel on the Grass." Says, "What's that?" Says, "I want you to get the Top Gun guys to fly those F4s over to Israel this week as soon as you can. Get them over there."
Wow.
Yeah.
Is that true? That's true?
Well, look it up. Look it up in. That's true. It's in.
Wow.
You can look it up on Wikipedia.
That's incredible.
Yeah. Look up Operation Nickel in the Grass or Yom Kippur War. It's in there.
That's the stuff of a film, isn't it? That's the kind of thing you would expect to make a movie out. Wow.
Yeah. So anyway, and I flew with those guys. I flew with the Israelis. You know, I flew when I was in Have Idea. They flew against us. You know, so yeah, they'd send their guys over to fly against us. So anyway, so we started Have Idea, and George Molnar was the commander of Red Hats at the time, General Molnar. And so he'd give us our checkout. He'd check us out. Check out in the MiGs, of course. You don't have a backseater, so it's all academics. And you know, and you'd have to, you know, they'd have all the manuals translated. Another reason I got into the MiGs is I knew a little Russian because I took Russian in college. And so I was the guy that had to give all the briefings to the general in front of the MiGs.
Okay.
So let's start off. Вы говорите по-русски, товарищ? Do you speak Russian? And they look at me. I said, "Нет, okay." I'll speak in English. So I'd have to dress up in a Russian uniform. We'd, you know, 4-star generals would come out to maybe sometimes they'd have to come to Area 51. Right? So we'd have 4-star generals. We'd have 4-star. I remember we had a 4-star Army general and a 4-star Air Force general come out to Area 51 to see what we're doing. And so I stand in front of the MiG-21, Vika Varite Paruski Tavarish. And in my Russian uniform, Russian flight suit, and I tell them, how we're training our pilots to beat the Russian airplanes, and this general, the Army general, would say, turn to the Air Force general. He says, it's very interesting. You're doing these trainings and realistic training like this. He says, we're training tank drivers, try to train them how to train against the enemy in a real war environment. He says, what happens if somebody you're training just can't hack it? What do you do with them? Do you take them out of the tank and you put them in some other, rifle division or something like that? I mean, that's what we have to consider. What do you do when you find a fighter pilot just can't hack it? He says we kill them. He says they usually die in an accident. That's what happens to them.
Yeah.
I'm going moving right along. So,
Mike, let me tell you about it. So one thing, I don't want you to talk about flying them just yet, because I'm gonna split this into two, and we're gonna come back and do that as a second interview. But I just want to explore as a sort of teaser for that second interview. I want to explore a little bit about again the emotional aspect of that experience for you. So, fighter pilots notoriously are alpha personalities, type 1 personalities, ego driven, and you don't sound like an egomaniac at all. I'm not trying to suggest anything, but that is a character trait of fighter pilots typically. Are you at this point then, do you feel special? Is this a tremendous experience, almost sort of mind-blowing in magnitude, that you've been exposed to this? You've flown into the container, you've been shown this thing, now you're looking at MiGs. How do you feel about the whole experience?
Yeah, well, like we started off, I told you about Forrest Gump. Okay. Forrest Gump was definitely not an alpha male. And I consider myself more like Forrest Gump. I'm not an alpha male. I'm more of an introvert than anything. And all my life I've been like that. And so I don't go around bragging about, I graduated #1 in pilot training, or I did this or I did that. And I'm pretty low key and pretty introverted. So I don't, and I'd say I feel lucky. Everything I've done, I feel lucky that I was there and I got to do it. And same thing with the MiGs. I was lucky to be there when Gail Peck came by, and I was on his wing, and he got me in here. That's why I was pretty sad when he passed away last week or last month, and because I wouldn't have been anywhere what I'm doing if it wasn't for him. And just being in the right place at the right time, and taking advantage of it. A lot of guys, said, well, I don't, there was a lot of guys that didn't want to go in the aggressors. They wanted to stay in the fighters, and they didn't see a future in the aggressors. And so, that's what I did. I felt lucky, and I felt blessed that I had this skill that I did in flying airplanes.
Yeah.
I feel like I feel like I was fortunate to have that ability and skill flying fast jets.
But does it feel, again, I appreciate that I'm sort of pushing a little here, but I want to know what it feels like to stand at that base. Does that base just feel like McDill or Eglin or any other Air Force base in the world when you stand on it and you're surrounded by sort of ridge lines and you're in the desert? Does it feel like going to Edwards? Does it feel like going to Creech? Does it feel like going to Nellis?
Which base? Area 51 or
Yeah.
Nellis?
Yeah, Area 51. Yeah. Does it feel special to be there? Or is it just another installation?
Well, no, it's definitely special. I mean, but it's not like any other installation because pretty much you're sequestered the whole time you're there. I mean, they have I don't know 20 hangars, okay, and you're in one hangar, and you're not allowed to see what's in the other hangars. And so when you go there, you go into that hangar, and it doesn't have any windows. Okay, so you stay in that hangar. They have a little snack bar, and that's it. I mean, you're there. You're there for the day. We'd usually go up for the day. Sometimes we go up for maybe 2 or 3 days, but you go up for the day. You'd land. You go into the hangar. You'd stay there. When you're ready to take off, they open the hangar doors and pull out the airplane. You get in it. You taxi, take off, do your mission, land, go back into the hangar, and stay there until your next flight. Mm-hmm. So, there's other things going on there. I mean, now I know there was, the stealth fighters. There was the SR-70. 71. There's all the stealth airplanes going on at the same time. So then there was the aliens that were in. They were in Hangar 14. You couldn't see them. So.
You're going to get some people in black cars turn up outside your house tomorrow.
Yeah, I mean, every time I bring it up, somebody asks me, "Well, did you see the aliens?" I said, "No, they kept us out of that hangar. It was Hangar 14. I couldn't go in there."